Hello, my name's Andrew, and I'm making a video here to show you something of the process called Rinko, which is a method that originated in Japan of packing a full-size bicycle for train travel. So I got interested in this because I was reading Jan Heiner's and Natsuko Hirose's blogs from Japan, where they're taking their bikes on trains and traveling to the mountains. It seemed like a convenient thing to do and didn't require very much effort in preparing the bike. So before we go further, it should be clear that Rinko will not let you make a full-size touring bike small enough to travel by airplane, according to the international regulations for airplanes. You can put it in a bag. It will be easy to put it in the back of the car. You can put it on a train, but it's still going to be too big for airplane travel. And the reason for that is sort of obvious if you look at a bike here. The frame is just too big. The main triangle is bigger than the bag that you can take on an airplane. So whatever else you do, it's not going to fit. But what Rinko lets you do is, by removing the fork and the rear wheel, get everything down to about the size of this triangle, which is about as good as you can get, unless you go to the expense of having your frame built with couplers on the main tubes, and then of course you can take it apart further. So before we look at the process of Rinko, I want to take a moment just to show you the modifications that were made when I built this bike up to enable Rinko. And there's actually surprisingly few. You notice this bike has got full metal fenders, and they're obviously going to stick out, and if they're left they're likely to get bent. So the Rinko trick is to split the rear fender, and you can see there's a small crack there, and the fender's actually in two pieces. There's this nut here which holds the pieces together, and there's an extra piece of fender underneath that acts as a tongue. You'll see more of this when we take it apart. So that's how the back gets shortened. How does the fork come out? Well, you can get... the fork just comes out by undoing the headset. Now the trick is you want to undo the headset without having to carry around special tools. Here's a headset wrench. You probably don't want to carry this in your toolkit. In fact, it may not even fit in your toolkit. And it's quite heavy. And that's normally required to undo the lock nut on top of the headset. So there's various solutions to this. In Japan you can get special headset wrenches that turn with a large Allen key. You can get special Rinko headsets that have a knurled lock nut that you just undo with your hand rather than with a wrench. If you have a threadless headset, of course, everything's fine, because then you can just undo everything with an Allen wrench that you're probably carrying with you. I didn't have any of those solutions to hand for this bike, so what I did was simply remove the lock nut altogether, and I've been riding it around without a lock nut at all. How does that work? Doesn't the headset work loose? Well, no. And the reason is, if you look closely here, the hanger for the front brake is actually clamped around the stem. And then there's a couple of spacers. And then there's the top, the bearing adjustment nut for the headset. So that hanger clamps around the stem, and it works rather like the stem on a threadless headset. It just pushes down on that nut and stops it from coming undone. So if I change the wrenches, if I try and undo the headset, I can undo that far, but then it stops because I'm up against the spacers which are held down by this clamp. So that's a Velo orange brake hanger, by the way. So that's my solution for the headset. And then you also want to be able to remove the handlebars altogether And the standard Rinko way of doing that would be to have the cable stops slit. So once you've released the tension on the cable, you can pull it out from the bike. This cable stop is not split, and when I got this bike it was already painted. So my solution was to put on a splitter on the cable. So I don't have to remove that cable at all, I can just remove the front part of the cable. If I had down tube shifters, I wouldn't have to do anything about this, but I don't. I wanted bar end shifters. So my solution is to use bar end shifters, and to remove the handlebars I just unscrew this bolt that holds the boss on and then remove the cable all the way down to the splitter. And I think that's going to be all I need. Here's the bike. How do we adapt it for Rinko? Well, the first thing is to remove the backs. Then we can disconnect the brakes. In this case I'm just unhooking straddle cables to give me a little bit of slack. Okay. Now let's try the rear fender. Again, I'm not using a work stand for the same reason. Let's pretend doing this in a railway station. So the bottom half of this nut is captive, and I just unscrew the top half. And also loosen the 5mm screws that clamp the fender stay. That's should enable me just to pull it out. And here you can see the way the fender is constructed. It's cut, and then there's a piece of scrap fender just epoxied to the inside to make a tongue. Let's put the bolt back in. It's important, of course, that you don't lose any of these nuts and bolts. So let's just tighten that down so it doesn't vibrate loose. And also tighten down the bolts on the R-clamps that hold the fender stays, because we don't want to lose those. Okay, so to remove the pedals, you obviously need a pedal wrench, or maybe not. But these particular pedals, they're Shimano mountain bike pedals, trying to remember the number, standard Shimano mountain bike pedals, M525s or something like that, will come off with an 8mm Allen wrench. So put that on the inside of the spindle and loosen it, and then you can just unscrew them. Don't lose your pedal washer. Set that to one side. And similarly for the other one. Remember, the left-hand pedal has got a left-hand thread, so you're going to have to start by turning it that way. Left-hand thread. Take off our pedals. And then we'll move this into top gear. And Back wheel. The wheel is on the ground, cassette side down, and I'm laying the frame on top of it. Now a real Rinko frame, one that's designed for Rinko, would have a hook. A lot of the frames have this up about here to retain the chain and also bring the derailleur forward so it's in front of the dropouts. When we finish, we want the bike to be able to stand out on the back of the saddle and the ends of the dropouts. So we want the derailleur to be in front of that plane. And without such a stop, my derailleur is not going to do that. We'll see what happens. And you can see, probably I didn't need to take the pedal off because otherwise this would not lay flat on the frame. Okay, let's try with a 4mm Allen wrench, my headset, clamp bolt, oops, that's a 5mm4, the clamp bolt on this clamp is underneath. You can't quite see it. I can open that clamp. Because I've released the straddle cable, there's no tension on this anymore. And I can take out to be able to open the headset. But I need to move the stem first, so let me do that. When I try and pull the stem out, the rear brake cable is going to get stuck, so I better release the rear brake cable. And my recipe for that, since this, I could have used a splitter like I did on the gear cables, but that's not going to work on this particular bike because the cable housing is continuous all the way to the back. So what I'm going to do is simply remove the nipple from the brake lever, disconnect it entirely, and that didn't take any tools at all. Now the derailleur cables, I'm going to have to open these splitters. No tools required for that. Just finger tight. And undo these bosses that they bolt to the frame. Oh, I have to wiggle this just a little bit to get it off. Let's put the bolt back and so I don't lose it. The same on the bottom side. Probably should have done this before I laid the frame down. Remember that for next time. So I'm going to frame up. The screw. Look at the box loose. Put the screw back. I suppose one could also just put all these little screws to a Ziploc bag and pray you don't lose it. But it seems putting them back in the frame is a good plan. Can you see? You know, I should just be able to pull the handlebars entirely loose. Oh, the last thing, I have my front light velcroed to the gear cable. So, undo that piece of velcro. That's the last thing that's holding the handlebars and the frame together. So put the handlebars down. Lay the frame back down. And proceed to do it with the headset. So now I can just undo, got two spaces here. Undo the headset with my fingers. Here's a lock washer, two spacer washers. And in this particular headset, the bearings are in a cage. So what do you do if you have a loose bearing headset? Well, you drop the bearings on the floor and you put in new ones when you reassemble the bike. Or you change your headset to one that doesn't have loose bearings. So far, I was doing this pretty much with clean hands, but I wanted to see how clean I could stay. Clearly I failed now. Once I've taken the headset apart, I've got grease all over my hands. So, not quite a clean hand job, but now the fork is off and I can lay this down on top of everything else. Now I want to show you an important little trick. We have the derailleur in the highest gear. If I push it into a lower gear, I create slack in the cable. I've got slack in the cable anyway because I've used my my cable coupler. But if you don't have a cable coupler, then the cable will be snug if you've got down tube shifters, for example. So having slack in the cable lets you pull the cable out of this stop and just let it hang slack. And the reason for that is if you have the cable jammed in the end here and you lay the bike down, you're going to kink it. But by putting some slack in, we can lay the bike down on the fork ends and not damage the cable. So that's an important little thing to remember to do. Doesn't matter that it flops around because it's not under tension. Another little thing that's important is not to lose the headset bearings. So I'm going to thread those bearings back on the steerer and Now the last part of the process is making it into a nice bundle. So I'm using the straight edge here to show you how the bike is going to sit when it's all tied up and ready to go. So nothing should protrude on my side of this straight edge. Beyond that, you have a little flexibility. How's the frame going to sit on the rear wheel? Where the cranks are going to go, where the front wheel is going to go. I've got some bottle cages here, so my rear hub is sticking through the bottle cage, and I've nestled the front fork between the two bottle cages. What's going to rub on the paint? Well, not very much. I've got if there's some metal to metal contact, you will need to pad it to preserve your frame. The only metal to metal contact I have is where the steerer tube is going to hit the top tube there. So I'm going to cut a piece of pipe insulation, which probably weighs a couple of grams, and slide it over the steerer there to pad things. And the other place here is my the nut on the end of my quick release is resting on the down tube, so I'm going to try and find a better way of positioning that so it doesn't seems like a good spot. Last thing is where to put the handlebars. So the Rinko directions that I've read say you wheel them into the rear triangle. It doesn't seem so easy. Not like that. And the steerer can come so that's not going to work quite like that because you see the handlebars are sticking out behind this plane. So I've got the handlebars nested between the inside the rear triangle, protruding through the front wheel. I have the chain going through the bend of the handlebars but not touching anything, and the rear tire is protecting the handlebars. I'm putting the removed part of the rear mudguard, or fender if you prefer, around the rear wheel on the top of the package, and I'm threading the mudguard stays through the spokes so that they don't catch on the frame. Now I should be able to put another strap. This one is not quite long enough. Good thing about these Velcro straps is if one of them isn't quite long enough, you can use two. Velcro them together, and we have one longer strap. And then a third strap around the top here. I prefer the Velcro straps because they don't have a metal buckle that might itself damage something. Well, let's see if we can actually make it stand up. Voila! A Rinko bike. Let's adjust the angle a little bit so you can see that better. Got a few cables sticking out. I can thread some of the spokes, some of the gear hangers, brake hangers don't cause any mischief. I think I might like an additional strap somewhere, but generally a pretty nice package. How big is it? Size, of course, depends partly on the size of your frame. This is a 52 centimeter frame. The package is 79 centimeters high. It's 31 inches by about 84 centimeters wide. It's 33 inches. 31 plus 33 is 64. That by itself is the maximum airline size. So of course we have a thickness which is about 12 inches. So this is not airline packable. But it is a pretty compact package. Now you can get bags, and the point about a Rinko bag is it doesn't support the weight of the bike. Like the bike is self-supporting. You just put the whole thing in the bag. And that will keep your greasy bits from getting on other people's clothes or baggage in the train. So the final step is to put your bike in the Rinko bag. Now I don't actually have a Rinko bag. You can buy them from ALPS-Hirose cycles, probably from a Japanese bike shop. I do have a travel bag for my Bike Friday, and I want to see if it will fit inside. And a shoulder strap and some handles. So I'm off to catch my train.